Hello.
Hey, how's it going, Dave?
Good. Is this Charlie?
Yeah,
Hey, how are you?
am I? I'm good. Am I the only one here so far?
Yeah, Avery's going to be joining in a minute.
Okay, awesome.
Let's see who else shows up. Yeah, this might be a real intimate one, but
Yeah,
we got a little song and dance, and we're taping it. So
that makes sense. I did tell Annabelle about this, and I don't know. She said she joined the Facebook group, but I don't know if she got the link. So I'm going to send this to her now if she's
okay.
available. Uh, so let me just do that. I'm going to try to do this on mute while sewing some face masks.
Love it.
Um, the Candid scene. Um, yeah, and I'm also doing it from my phone, so hopefully
Oh,
that
nice.
works out fine.
Sounds
Um,
good.
yeah, how long of a program do you think you had today?
Probably 20 to 30 minutes. I think it depends on who shows up. The idea was that this one
Perfect.
be kind of pretty chill and casual. We've got some high level stuff to share with anyone who is
Cool.
interested in it, and otherwise, I think mostly just kind of seeing what everybody else is up to and how it's been, because it is wild out there. No two people have had the same experience trying to get this money, and we found the best thing to do so far is just like talk with everybody we can and be like, oh, see two Charlies.
Oh, there we go. I lost you for a second.
Okay.
I was trying to turn on the camera thing. Okay. Um, and then I've got people that are I'm trying to get these masks sewn up so that I can get like photograph them and get them online so people can buy them. But people
Yeah.
are I should have done all of that before I said to anybody that I was making them, because people are texting me left and right like,
Of course.
can I just get like two? Which is, I mean, not a terrible position to be in, but it's also just an odd like, this is our life now kind of a weird thing. So
Totally.
um yes, I have no idea if the video is actually the front or the back of.
I see your face. Oh, and I see a
Wait,
table. Oh,
now
you were there for a second.
here I am. Okay, it's not showing me a preview, so I have no idea what's going
Okay, great.
on. But yeah, it's it's just an odd position we all find ourselves in. I mean, all of us, So, um, but yeah, this is good. I actually did the SBA application this morning myself. Um, and I know a lot of people have been talking about these, and the interesting question that I have is, not the question itself is not interesting, but just about whether the Paycheck Protection loan, which I know is not this loan, is going to be appropriate for people who are independent contractors. But who
Yes, but I
knows?
think we know the answer to that, which is maybe.
Maybe. Yeah, it seems to be the situation there, is just a solid maybe on all of that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Charlie, it's Annabelle. I just joined
Hey.
without video because you don't want to be part of that.
Well, this is welcome to my sewing studio, aka my kitchen, um,
Beautiful.
aka just boxes of wine everywhere.
I'm coming right over.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Annabelle, we actually got a delivery from K&L this morning. And let's see if I can pan over there. The bar is now fully stocked.
Nice.
Oh, hey, Avery. How's it
Hi
going?
there. Good. I'm joining in here. Sorry I'm late.
We're
I wish
just,
I could have just like a cute picture instead of that.
you have to set up your Zoom account and then you can upload a picture. Because I think, let's see
Oh.
here. If I stop it, I think it's like I'm going to call it a cute picture. Yeah. So that's the trick there.
And if I can just show off my chroma key green
I
Zoom
do like
shirt,
that.
it's really
No way.
this was hiding in the back of the closet.
I'm gonna be
It had
brave
to
and
come out
join
today.
video because I just
Join
feel
video.
weird being a black
Just do.
box.
Let's
Oh
get to
my
it.
God.
Hi.
Come on. Look at you with your hair. It's
Yeah, it's
amazing.
called midlife crisis.
I love it. I love it. Very good. All
Welcome.
right.
I'm home alone with child and many pets, so please excuse any interruptions. I'll try to mute if that happens.
No worries.
This is the
Yeah,
new normal.
aren't we all? This
How's
is
it
the new
going,
normal.
guys?
It's going well. How are you doing?
Awesome.
Yeah.
So great.
I say that
So
every time,
great.
and I it's unclear whether I'm kidding or not, but I think today's been kind of fine, I guess.
I know. I
Today's
think I'm
been kind of
living in
fine.
like a sea of denial. I have been just recently, like in the last 48 hours, getting really serious about figuring out the loan crap, and it is a nightmare.
Good.
Actually, my
Well,
accountant just emailed me, which I haven't read it yet, but
you've
it's got all the
come,
forms that I need.
you've come to the right place. We, for better or for worse, Avery and I have spent probably a combined, like literally probably we spent 80 hours working on this since the first of the month. It's just insane. But we've at least identified, like we know what the unknowns are now. We know the knowns. We don't have as many unknown unknowns. And part of the reason I wanted this to be the topic of this week's Candid Shop Talk is so we could just kind of share what we know, because so much of it is tribal and so much of it is in direct conflict either with itself or with other official proclamations. So should I dive into this?
And I mean, is it quite possible that like they just don't have enough money to, or like resources to handle any of this?
100%. I think it's hard because I don't want to get political, but we're also currently administered by a neo-fascist kleptocracy that lies about things that are readily apparent. So I don't take anybody's word on anything at the moment, except that first come, first serve, get in there. Whether or not there's some kind of overriding favoritism, which I'm sure is going to come into play. We don't know that. And the only thing I do know is that the thing says you can apply up until June 29th, 2020, but I read that as April 9th, 2020. And I already feel like we're way behind the ball because we just got our PPP in this morning because that was when our bank finally was able to process it.
Did you use, sorry to interrupt. I don't know if you have like an agenda or thing that you're doing. But did you go through your bank that you already bank with? Because my bank, I have Wells Fargo, and they're not accepting anybody else.
Yeah, let me, for the sake of simplicity, let me kind of start at the start, just so that this is, it feels like narrating a horse race. I don't know what the historical value of this document is actually going to be after this video because the situation seems to change hourly. But the story so far, let me turn on my screen share real quick and walk everybody, all our folks at home who will be viewing this later. Desktop 2, share. Okay, so the USA CARES Act was passed last month, and this is the best diagram I've seen that sort of shows the entire breakdown of where the money goes. $2 trillion, $560 billion goes to individuals, $500 billion goes to large corporations, $377 billion goes to small business, $339 goes to state and local government, then some crumbs for public health and the social safety net, which is its own side conversation. But point being, there are, as I counted it, there are sort of 5 ways that people like us, smaller to medium-sized business people, can get money. And that is through the individuals. You've got the cash payments, which are coming out, at some point, which if you meet the criteria, you will get. They're means tested, so not everybody gets it, but that's just like the check from the government that was highly publicized that's coming out at some point. There's what people are calling super unemployment, which is, the extra unemployment benefits. I found this little thread that I screenshotted on my phone from Reddit that was the best resource I've found on this, that just kind of runs through the math. And the math is such that because you get an extra $600 a week on top of your normal unemployment benefits, anyone who's making a salary of less than $64,896 is going to be better off being unemployed. It basically equates to a $65K roughly annual salary. So there's that. So those are the 2 ways that everyone, who meets the criteria of having filed taxes and being in the system, et cetera, can get that money. As for the actual businesses, that 379 billion or whatever that sum was is divided up basically into 2 pieces. And those pieces are the EIDL loan, what does EIDL stand for? It is Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and the PPP, which is the Payroll Protection Program. And so what's interesting about these guys, and there's all sorts of resources. The best one I've found in Oregon, we posted this on our Facebook, is this human rights lawyer, Shauna Curfey, wrote this blog post that wound up being just very, very helpful, that sort of breaks down the whole process and talks about what you can and can't do. EIDL and PPP, you can apply to both of them. And the kick is that you can't double dip. So you can use them for slightly different things, but you can't apply to both and then use both of them to pay your payroll. Like you can use the payroll protection to pay for payroll, and then you can use the EIDL to pay for your rent and other utilities. And then it gets a little Wild Westy as you get into the PPP, because it was released with it was kind of hustled out the door with untested and unverified language. So there's been a ton of confusion. This article at Forbes, which we've also got up on our Facebook group, talks about, it's from April 5th, so now it seems like it's a generation ago, but it does talk about the specifics, and it gets into the nitty gritty of why every single bank has a different application and a slightly different way of calculating this number. Basically, the language is super, super fuzzy, and nobody really knows what's going on. So they're taking out their best guesses. But what's important with the EIDL, you go to the EIDL, it takes, again, it takes 5 minutes to fill out the application. It says it takes 2 hours and 10 minutes. But if you go to covid19relief.sba.gov, this is very, very quick to fill out. You're going to want to screenshot it at the end, of course, or print screen or whatever, because you get no email confirmation or anything from having submitted this. It says that you will be getting the money in 3 days, but that certainly hasn't happened to anyone. I don't know anyone who's gotten the money. But the idea being, you want to jump in?
And one thing is that, it takes 5 minutes. There are a couple of key pieces of information that you would need, which is specifically your gross revenue and cost of goods, which if you don't have those, then it takes longer. But if you do have those on hand, it is actually quite simple. One thing that is also not readily clear is that they talk about this $10,000 grant, but that's not a flat amount. It would be up to $10,000. So that's a ceiling, not a floor, and I think that's really easy to miss.
Yeah, no, that's great clarification, and it's all, usually the terms loan and grant aren't interchangeable, but the idea with both of these is that they are forgivable loans. So they start off as loans, but with the PPP, you've got to keep people on payroll and not fire them for the 8-week period, and then it becomes forgiven.
And that one also, this is really gets dropped in the mix on that one. There's a period of time specific, I think it's sometime in June, and I don't recall exactly when you have to have your payroll, you have to have spent the money on payroll. So if you've already laid people off, that doesn't just mean like, okay, too late, this is not applicable. And if you were doing that defensively, or you needed the money at the time or couldn't afford payroll at the time, but now things are starting to shake out, there's a window by which you need to rehire or to hire those positions again. The other thing about that is that, and look, we're not accountants, we're not lawyers.
Yeah, I should have said that 30 times by now. This is not financial advice. We're
not financial advice,
but stories around the campfire.
Business to business. One thing that's also important is that certain amounts of this, in terms of the total amount that you could be loaned, is based on the amount that you, it's 2.5 times your average based on their pokey math on what exactly is included there. But what that doesn't necessarily take into account is that how much of it can actually turn into a grant is a larger part of the conversation, rather than how much of it stays a loan. So once you get loaned those amounts, assuming that you're not requesting an amount fraudulently, if you end up having to spend it on other stuff, that's not illegal necessarily, as far as I understand it. Not a lawyer, but if you were to spend it on other things like utilities or rent or something like that, then you would end up it would turn into a loan rather than a grant. And so some of the dialogue is around how much of it can become grantable, which is obviously much more desirable from a business standpoint as opposed to just having additional debt. But for companies that don't have access to debt, particularly a debt of like 4% with a deferred initial repayment, which is very favorable, and it's the kind of thing that large companies get. I think that's important. I think that there's also, and this is just a little bit meta, but as small businesses, I think that there's a little bit of a USA rah up by the bootstraps mentality that people may or may not have guilt about this situation and needing access to these funds. And my view on this is that, look, large businesses have no such qualms and are getting these funds in incredible amounts. The entire liquidity program operated by the Fed is basically just giving out cash to large businesses backed by nothing for 0%. And so I don't think that this is like a fairness conversation. This is really just what's needed. And small businesses, the PPP, for instance, the whole point of it is to keep people employed. And if people are not employed, the whole economy is going to be in a much worse situation. And so this is essentially doing their best at pausing some amount of the suffering for a small period of time. And it's important that we jump on that because small businesses employ the vast majority of people in this country. And so if small businesses collapse, then the economy will collapse. So don't feel bad about it is my feeling. Let's just get through this and then we can work it all out later.
Agreed. Yeah, no, that's a really good point to bring up. I think that's, the math that jumps to mind, when I was looking at that and doing the paperwork finally on the PPP is that if you've got, you get a loan amount up to 2.5 times your monthly payroll that you then have to spend on payroll in 8 weeks. Logically, it would seem that some of that is going to wind up being a loan that doesn't get paid back. And it's going to be interesting to see how that works out because I don't know, if you can get around that by just increasing hiring or increasing salaries or how that works, or if it's just sort of designed for a portion of the loan to not be forgiven. But everyone's still kind of figuring out as they go. One of the big questions, the biggest question with the PPP, the EIDL is right there on the website, and you can apply for it, and it goes into that hole, and who knows what's going to happen. The PPP was formally rolled out last Friday, was it? I've lost all track of time, but it was last Friday. Everybody was scrambling because there's very much this sense of first in, first out. There's not going to be enough to go around. And it was just horrifically confusing. Updates kept coming throughout the day and into the night and through the weekend. We looked around. Initially, our bank and credit union, we've got accounts at a bank and a credit union. They were not on the list. And then later in the day, they were, because first it was FDIC approved lenders, and then it expanded out to NCUA, which encapsulated
some credit unions.
Our credit union. But we sort of were going far and wide, throwing out, getting in the pipeline with everybody we can. One thing we quickly learned is that even if your lending facility or your bank is not, or at the time was not listed, you still want to go through and do everything you can to do it through one of your existing banks. The biggest reason being that there's this whole process, what's called KYC, know your customer, that if you're a business and you're banking with a bank or a credit union, they've already done this. And it's the deep background check to make sure you're not a fraudulent entity. That is why, a lot of these places, we threw in an application at US Bank because we don't bank there, but they seem to have a program up and running. And I talked to someone who was like, yeah, throw in your application. And then later in the day, he said, we're actually only processing existing accounts. We're not doing new ones because of this. So that I think is the one ironclad piece of advice is even if your current bank is saying, we're on hold and it looks like there's another one down the street that you can just walk into the branch and potentially apply with them. Even if they're telling you you can, it's probably going to be quicker to just wait for yours to come online. And again, it just mechanically, it's important to realize that with the PPP, it is a bank, it is lending done by the individual banks that is backstopped by the federal government. So it's more of like, it's more of like a mail-in rebate than a registered coupon. It is the banks first that are doing the lending. And as a result, your existing relationship with your existing bank or credit union is what's going to speed that process along.
Yeah, and to go into the weeds a little bit on that,
Please.
the reason that that Wells Fargo can't participate in the PPP is because of their awful behavior for the last umpteen years, and as a result, they got slapped with restrictions in terms of what their balance sheet looks like, meaning what kind of liabilities they're allowed to take, what kind of risk, and even though the loans themselves are backstopped by the federal government, and so essentially were they to default, they would be made whole regardless. They are saying they can't do these loans anyways because it would show up on their balance sheet, which as far as I'm concerned is actually pretty absurd, and it's just them trying to get out of the restrictions that the government put on them for their awful behavior. Because the government knows full well that that's not money that's on the balance sheet for reals. So Wells Fargo is still just an awful, awful organization. Sorry, but it's true.
No, it's.
I agree
Yeah.
wholeheartedly. I agree.
Well, and it's terrible that your business, if you happen to bank with them because
Right.
they got a branch in your town, or whatever.
Well, I think had I been more kind of aware 10 years ago when I just went to my bank that I opened in 1996,
Sure.
it was very different. So yes, but it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Well, even our, I was a Wells Fargo customer forever and hate them, so ended up opening credit union account, was like feeling great, paid way less fees, everything was awesome, but even though they technically are allowed to administer these loans, they're not. So and you have to have a bank or else it won't work.
Yeah, and you have to have had a bank on March 31st. That's
right.
the kicker. Is
Yep.
You can't. You're kind of stuck in whatever lane you're stuck in.
That's
so
lame.
It's awful.
Yeah, I mean, can I ask a question? So
Please,
is there
please,
any
please.
point
Sure.
in me continuing this adventure? Because I am with Wells Fargo. I have been for many years, and so there's no point in me trying to contact anybody else on that list that the SEC is providing, or credit unions or anything, because I haven't been set up with them, obviously.
So the question is, there are going to be, I think the answer is yes. The most, it doesn't mean that it's all over. This is the beginning of it's not a bailout. This is the beginning of the relief effort. My expectation would be that there will be subsequent layers of this, and that the guidance is going to change, the rules are going to change, additional programs are going to be added, these systems are going to be amended. And so we actually, at some point in here, the only people that we were able to find that would get a process started was US Bank. And so even though we didn't end up submitting our application through PPP, and to be clear, our bank still has not submitted our application, but we submitted our application to the bank so that they could submit it to blah, blah, blah. We got in line. So US Bank was the only one that I was able to find that would consider having non-bank customers. Oh my gosh, I think we have
You're having your BBC moment.
a tiger hiding around here.
But yeah, and I will say that to follow up on that, one thing that we did, because we've been, when I think about the amount of this past week that I've lost just like refreshing the same websites and having them say, coming at 9, coming at 11, coming at 4, coming tomorrow. One thing that you can do that's going to be universal is download the application and just start getting the stuff in line that you need to get in line, which is going to be there are the things that you're going to need to get are your, and the application will highlight this, but there's certain payroll data that you need. I think, again, as of the last time I checked, you get to pick whether, if you're a new business that just started out, you're going to go off payroll from the first quarter of 2020. That probably doesn't apply to anyone here. So you're going to then be able to choose between either the last 12 months prior to the application. So and I think it's whole months. So it's like April 1st, 2019 to March 31st, 2020, or January 1st through December 31st, 2019. And I've seen both written down, but the application itself specifies that you can do that. So that gives me some degree of confidence. If you have a payroll company like Square or Gusto, they will have a button that says click here to download the reports you need, which I believe are the 461s, 941s. Copies of payroll tax reports with the IRS, including forms 941, 940, state income and unemployment tax filing reports, etc. The safest bet is and what we wound up doing, because we, of course, not planning on this, we switched payroll providers at the beginning of the year, so we had to sort of combine our Gusto spreadsheet from with our Square spreadsheet, and then compiling this sort of beast from all these different sources. We've just amassed everything from January 1st to April 1st, the full 15 months or whatever that winds up being, just so we have all the data, and then we can sort of look at it and see which one makes the most sense to apply for. But that process, I can't imagine anyone's life is as complicated as ours, but it did take a surprisingly long time to get all that information in one area. Another thing you're going to need, hadn't ended this sentence, what was it? Oh, so the independent contractor question, that's a big one. That again, this information is 3 days old, so who knows how real it is, but here, let me do a quick screen share. Avery found the best article of that day, and she shared it, and it was this Forbes article we linked on our Facebook group. Do employers get to estimate to independent contractors in payroll costs? And this should have a very clear yes or no answer, but it is surprisingly contentious because there's this one paragraph that is incredibly vague. And the very, very short version is no, but it's probably worth throwing it in there anyway, just because, tomorrow that might be reversed and you'll feel like an idiot if you've applied, if you've extracted that from your data and you're not getting as much money as you need. I think ultimately the people underwriting and reviewing the loan are going to have the final say and the most up-to-date information. But the point being, the reason that independent contractors are not included in this is that they, as independent contractors, will be able to apply as their own sole proprietorship or self-employer, whatever they are, for their own version of the PPP. And so if they were also included in your payroll, then that would be double compensation for them. So that part at least logically makes a little bit of sense of why they're not included. However, everything from the calculation sheet that they send out, includes them in there when it shouldn't, and is just deeply, deeply confusing.
It's truly unclear whether or not it should or shouldn't, just in general. And so I think that, what we decided to do is make it clear to our lender what was and what wasn't included there. And the truth is that then they are going to have better information than we are. And so we're going to err on the side of giving them more information. And then essentially, again, what we're talking about here is a loan. So we're interesting because we had a lot of payroll growth in advance of this. And so our average was way out of whack anyway. So worst case scenario, we get a loan and then spend it all on payroll, which is the whole point. And right. We're doing our best to just keep everybody on payroll and are working. So that's what we want to do. In the event that you would get a grant that was, or a loan that was too much, then presumably you wouldn't pay it all on payroll and then you just owe it as a debt, which is not ideal, but and that's not the point, because people, ideally we would leave the money would stay in the system so that people who are not you can access those funds. But if, as far, my thinking on this in particular is, will that money get spent on payroll in the next 2.5 months? If the answer is yes, then I think that's pretty much the whole point.
Yeah, And then not to completely shift gears, but the last thing to look at is that there are potentially state and local community level lending and granting programs that don't show up as part of this that are just out there. I know that in Portland, Prosper Portland had some small business grants, and now they're doing small business lending. And I think it's worth just kind of pounding the pavement and seeing what sources are out there, because, you know, at the end of the day, this is just keeping the lights on, trickle down economics, I think has been disproven on a macro level, but trickle up, I think, does work, where, you know, you need to put money in the system for anything to move, and that's the name of the game. And there are a lot of sources of those, and, you know, honestly, the harder something is to find, the easier your chances are going to be of getting it, because that means other people can't find it either. But I know we've found, you just go looking and you're going to find a lot of organizations that are doing grants and loans right now. And we swallowed our pride long ago. I mean, these are very weird times. I think everybody's fallen off the same cliff, and whatever we can do to keep the economy going at our level is going to be what saves the day. So that's kind of that went off the checklist that I had. Anything else you guys want to chat about?
Yeah, I mean, I would.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so I filled out my form yesterday, 2 days ago. Okay, so I'm in a position where I have, we're an S Corp. We have one full-time employee that we just started on payroll like January 19th. Mm-hmm. He was, you know, part-time prior to that. We run our payroll through QuickBooks, and then I have 2 1099, Charlie and my bookkeeper. So we're really small, and then my husband and I are, you know, partners in the business. So we have a really low, you know, like we don't need that much money. And mm-hmm. I seem to understand that I can't claim my 1099s, correct? Like I can't claim Charlie in my payroll. I can only claim my full-time guy that I run payroll on, correct? I mean, from your understanding.
Okay.
Oh, I was going to say that's what it looks like from that article that you just shared. But I will say, so I've been listening in on these same sort of Zoom calls that my husband is having. So he is in wholesale sales consulting, like I am, and just in the wine industry. And so he is selling for a couple different companies, and one of them went as far as to say on their Zoom meeting the other day that they went ahead and sent in their application for the PPP, and they included all of their independent contractors. I don't know if that is something that they did that was perhaps an error, or if they're, you know, it's going to turn out that that's not actually going to be included, or what. I mean, they've only submitted the application. I think, like you said, no one has actually gotten anything back yet. So,
yeah.
So some companies are including their independent contractors. And then my other main client, which is a company in New Orleans, is I think also doing the same, and I think her intention is to include me, but I don't know. No one seems to know for sure if that's actually the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I would like to, obviously, but I was on a Goldman Sachs call. I was part of the 10,000 Small Businesses program a couple of years ago, so I've been privy to kind of these intimate whatever they're doing, and you know, they're evil as well. But you know, they seem to state pretty clearly that you could not claim your 1099s. But it's just such a low overhead. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like everybody said, I mean, they even said, these are experts. It was a lawyer, you know, a loan guy and someone from Goldman Sachs. And, you know, they were saying like they go to bed and they wake up and the rules are different. So,
yeah.
You know, I guess my concern is, so, basically, I applied, I filled out the form, but I don't know where to take it. Like, I don't know what to do. I don't know if I'm supposed to just like cold call the places that are listed in my area. I haven't been banking with them since March 31st, so it doesn't really matter. Wells Fargo, I tried calling my local branch, and there was a huge long wait, but as I was holding, they said they can't deal with it in person. It has to be done online, and then I go online, and of course it's closed. Yeah. I then also filled out an application today on Cabbage, which I'm not super familiar with, but someone recommended it, and it was very easy until I got to the last part where they wanted all this paperwork, the 941s, and my accountant's like, you don't have those because you don't run payroll. And so now I'm just kind of like, well, I don't know. I just feel like I'm in a lose-lose situation.
So in the situation of a sole proprietor where I think there's an understanding, S corps are still pass-through entities, so it's not really. Okay. It's still, for the tax standpoint, it's still a sole proprietorship.
Okay.
Disregarding.
I'm not an accountant.
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to hold any of you responsible. Like, I literally am a girl who draws things and puts them onto wood, and I'm trying to figure this shit out myself. And I'm like, what? Like, this is so beyond. Hey, and I don't even take I don't take a paycheck. I don't take a regular, draw at all. So I'm like, this is so out of my scale.
Yeah. So I think that this is worth so S corps and non-S corps, like LLCs, for instance, are all pass-through entities. So because they're pass-through entities, they essentially are taxed on this, or considered the same. So even if you're an S corp, that's okay. This is some of the same essentially, you're still a sole proprietorship in the eyes of the feds, is my understanding. Talk to an accountant. So what I'm reading here, though, is that the way that there is an understanding that sole proprietorships operate differently, and you might not have 100% of your income operating through W-2 because it's legal, and there's nothing wrong with that, which is basically that the profit of the company, some of it you pay to yourself through salary, and some of it is just the profit of the company, which you then pay yourself back through distributions, or pay yourself through distributions, and are taxed at a different rate. That's sort of the whole point. They just set this up this way. It's not us. So like, that's the way it works. And so for S corps and folks who are paid through non-W-2 income, which in general, and again, this is like ballparky, but it's completely ordinary for you to pass through 40, 50% of S corp income through S distributions and pay at a different rate. So, and not through W-2. So because of that, you're going to be looking at different metrics. For instance, I just poking around here, but I think it's something along the lines of like gross profit, for instance, and dividing that number by 12, because the whole point of this number is to figure out how much money that organization needs to run for a couple months without any sales. Like, that's the whole point. And so,
yeah, and I feel like I figured that out even like literally just for my employees, including my 1099s, you know, because we're, you know, so my whole thing is just to keep my employee employed. And that does concern me about that whole double dip issue, which was also mentioned on the Goldman Sachs thing yesterday, because I did apply for the EIDL. I mean, it's so easy. And, you know, we did that pretty quickly, but I would literally, I'm in a unique position. I don't pay rent. I don't pay utilities. Like, I really don't have a large overhead. It's just keeping my guy covered, but also like my industry is completely dried up. So it's kind of like, I don't even know what I'm going to have him do per se, except fun art projects, I guess. I don't know. So it's, you know, that is a concern, but I feel like I can't even properly apply for PPP at this point. Like, I just don't think I have the option of doing so, unless I'm like pounding the pavement, going to a ton of, you know, smaller organizations. And if, you know, like I literally only want like $15,000 or $13,000, not a lot of money. And I was thinking maybe that would be an advantage, but I still just don't even know how I am going to properly submit this information.
If I can chime in real quick. So in the last 4 hours, Wells Fargo has expanded participation in the Paycheck Protection Program. This is a news release on their website. They have this link here, update.wf coronavirus paycheck protection program, which when you click through it says, here's what to do. And also, if you didn't get it in by April 5th, we can't accept any new people.
Yeah, I saw that this morning.
So, but I think this literally, just Googling the news, this came out within the last 4 hours that they're expanding participation. So, you know, which just drives home the moral of the story, which is just like, 1 hour ago, Fed lifts restrictions on Wells Fargo from CNN. It sucks, but until your thing is, until you've got the money in hand, you just kind of have to keep checking back on stuff because it changes. They are, for better or for worse, probably for worse, they are rewriting the rules, and everybody's figuring this out every hour of every day until this is over. So maybe a spot of good news for you.
Well done, Wells Fargo, for using this as leverage to
get out of the penalty box.
Get out of the penalties. Good job, guys.
Yeah.
God.
But also, you guys need to, this is it. I mean, I suppose it's, better and worse. Some combination of bitter pill and the ability to help other businesses that actually use them for banking.
Yeah, I mean, and I use Wells Fargo as well, so I'm in a great, and so does my husband. So we're in a great position. Yay! Like, and I've known that I shouldn't be for a long time, but I've never done anything about it. So here we go.
This is not the time to change banks,
right.
Unfortunately.
Apparently not.
And just to circle back,
just go ahead.
I was going to say, just as an addendum to Avery's. When you're talking about S corps and distributions, I don't think you can retroactively go back and call something a distribution. Like, you have to have that set up in advance, right? As your structure.
So I'm looking at this right now. I'm almost positive, or I think that the way that you would calculate it is as 1/12 of your Schedule C income. Yeah. So
that sounds about right.
I think it's your net profit.
1/12 of your net profit.
Yeah, which I think is listed on your. It's either going to be on your, on your Schedule C.
On the P&L. Yeah.
And another thing I'd heard, which again, this is from earlier in the week from a banker that I was talking to at On Point about how to figure it out for a sole proprietorship. If you're an LLC that is just a pass through and hasn't taken the S corp election, and it's just like you're paying yourself with draws. He said that the best thing to do is when you're putting together your compensation spreadsheet to just tally up the draws that you took and have that be,
list an average.
Move the thing from account A to account B. But that's essentially what you have instead of a salary. But that was, 100 hours ago when it was just a completely different world. And I don't know how right that was or how much he was just guessing. But
yeah. The other thing is your 1099 MISC form is the other place where that would live. Is like when you're reporting income there. So,
although it is uniquely tricky for sole proprietors who just if you don't pay yourself and you just kind of put it in one account and then move it over to the other one when it's time to buy groceries and pay rent.
Right. Yeah. Great way of doing
100
business.
columns. You gotta. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I did it that way.
No, I mean we're not that. It's more clear than that. But no, I mean my whole thing is my husband still got some income coming in, fortunately, even though he owns his own business as well. But for me, it's just about keeping, especially with you, Charlie, like there's so much work we could be doing right now.
Totally.
So, keeping that going. So I guess I'll just, I just have to figure out what documentation is required. And I think I have to rework my form a little bit because I'm just worried that the way we've been filing taxes is maybe not correct. And having only had payroll in action for a year, I don't know.
Yeah, and it is worth saying too, that sort of a meta note for everybody is that, if you have an accountant, they did get one large project taken off their plate this week, which is getting taxes in by April 15th. So it's like everyone I know who speaks with any degree of confidence and seems like they're sleeping at night over this, usually it includes the words, I talked to my accountant and
I know. I think I need to reach out to him, although he's like, I think 80 years old and lives in Florida. So I'm not convinced he's going to be around.
Yeah.
So horrible thing to say. Anyway, trying to see if there's any other notes that I had. I don't think so. I think that's it for me. I don't know. I feel very disheartened. I mean, I appreciate all the information, but I'm just like, it feels completely overwhelming. And like I said, like we're both artists and we're trying to figure this crap out and it feels really wonky, and to not even, I don't know, part of me is just like, well, forget it,
Yeah.
Like it doesn't seem worth it. We've just got to figure out another way, but I'm not, mass producing masks right now, so I don't really have any income.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Right.
good times.
Good times. No, it sucks. It just sucks. And we're, we are, I think we're the lucky ones too, and that we even can do this. I think there's so many giant cracks for people to slip through that don't even have access to this broken process but again, I mean, I keep, the pep talk I keep giving myself as I refresh, get another broken website full of lies. It's like, this is, you just got to get after it, because this, who knows what tomorrow is going to bring. And this is money that right now is allegedly for us. And not just for ourselves, but for, to keep society, the wheels on society.
Right. Exactly.
We got to get after it.
Yeah. No, that's true. And I mean, the one thing is that things seem to be changing constantly. So hopefully one of these days they'll change, in our direction, and we can get some of this relief.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it does seem, I mean, especially with the Goldman thing, like it was just these, the scenarios they were saying were so beyond anything that anyone I even know would have to deal with. You know what I mean? Like, such huge business. I mean, the fact that they define small business as under 500 employees is insane to me.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, that's the standard and just across the whole government. I think everything else is technically a micro business.
Yeah. Cool.
That's the
micro business strong for 10 years.
But that being said, the vast majority of companies, I think it's around 75%, have 20 employees or fewer. So
yeah, well, okay. Well, I guess we'll just keep trying to fight the good fight and see what comes up, and I'll just refresh Wells Fargo and see. I mean, other than that, I'll call my accountant and go from there, and hopefully this CARES Act will come through, and hopefully the EIDL will come through at some point.
Yeah. No, and for what it's worth, one thing I found really helpful, and I think Avery's done the same, is we just Google your bank and PPP, because you're not, it took me, I was digging around, I work with On Point Credit Union, and I was looking around everywhere, I couldn't find anything, Googled On Point PPP and found a news article that then linked to the subpage that would have been impossible to find. So don't count on your bank's webmaster to have the latest news, I think is.
Yeah, okay. Well, Charlie, you and I can work with that since now I know we both have the same bank.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, I'm going to hop on another Zoom call about a slightly different topic.
Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate all the support you guys are giving us. It's really, really helpful.
Of course, no, and thanks for coming by. We're trying to curate our Facebook group as just kind of an asynchronous version of this that you can refresh at 2 a.m. If we're gonna keep throwing links up there as long as we have them.
Nice. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Sounds great. Thank you guys.
Good luck out there. Be safe.
Thanks. You
Bye,
too.
everybody.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Take care.